Hi students, this is Unit 2, Notes 11, Industrialization. You will need page 15 of your packet, page 15, a highlighter, and a pencil. The Industrial Revolution. In the 1700s, a great change began in Europe. Gradually, machines took the place of many hand tools. The Industrial Revolution began in Britain in the textile or cloth making industry. The use of spinning wheels for making thread by hand was replaced with large textile mills powered by water to run spinning machines and looms. The Industrial Revolution slowly spread to the United States. During the War of 1812, the U.S. industry grew when we couldn't trade with Britain. So that switch from the spinning looms to machines allowed them to make a lot more product faster. So, our first thing is our vocabulary word, Industrial Revolution, and that is the use of machines to do work formerly done by hand. Okay, so once again, the Industrial Revolution is where things that used to be handmade are now made by machine. The textile industry. Two American businessmen helped to bring textile mills to the United States. So, textile mills are mills that make cloth. Samuel Slater and Francis Cabot Lowell both used the ideas from British textile mills to build their own mills in America's New England region. The New England region is in the northeast of the United States. The mills relied on power generated by moving water through the mill. Textile mills sprang up along rivers in the northern cities and provided many new jobs for American and immigrant workers. Okay, so on the bottom of page 15 of your notes, you guys have a chart with the inventions that we're going to look at, how did they work, and how it impacted the United States. So our first invention are the textile mills, and those are factories powered by water for making cloth. Factories for making cloth is highlighted, and it provided jobs for women and immigrants. So Francis Cabot Lowell built his textile mill in Waltham, Massachusetts. His factory had spinning machines that spun threads and power looms that wove fabric. His factory was different in another way. He hired women to live in boarding houses and work in the mills. This provided young girls with education and financial opportunities unlike ever before. So Francis Cabot Lowell hired women to work in his textile mills. But in this situation with him is that he also provided that room and board, which was great because the women would live on the grounds where the mills were in their boarding houses. They would be fed meals every day. They would make money, and they would have their living arrangements paid for. So it's kind of a good deal for single women. Most textiles were made from cotton or wool. Cotton is lighter weight and less itchy to wear. The textile industry in the northern cities began to rely on shipments of cotton from southern plantations. There's a picture of the raw cotton there below. And they would put it into the spinning jenny, which evolved and became the power loom, which we'll talk about in just a second. And then that would create these bolts of fabric. The power loom is what turned cotton threads into bolts of fabric. Okay, so the cotton makes the thread goes into the power loom becomes fabric. This increased the demand for cotton from the South. The power loom, because it could take these threads and make it into these big bolts of fabric, it all of a sudden has become very easy to make clothing and curtains and all sorts of textiles that people would want or need. So, because of this, the demand for cotton went way high. You can see from that picture before I click that the picture on the left is the cotton as it's picked. You can see that it's dirty. It's got like leaves and stuff attached to it and whatnot. And the picture on the right is the clean cotton. The difficult thing about growing cotton was that it was very labor intensive. Cotton bolls had to be picked by hand off the plants in the fields. Then it had to be cleaned to separate the seeds and dirt from the cotton fibers. It took many workers long hours to pick and clean cotton on plantations. So they pick the cotton by hand, those cotton bolls, and then you can see that it's kind of dirty there, and then it has to be separated. The seeds and the stems and all that stuff have to be separated from the actual cotton fibers. Eli Whitney from Massachusetts took a job as a tutor on a plantation. He saw how cotton was cleaned by hand, and he set to work inventing a machine that would clean more quickly. His invention was called the cotton engine, or gin for short. Within 10 years, cotton was the South's most important crop. So you take the cotton, okay, and you put it into the loom and you crank the handle, and that will separate the seeds, which will fall down into the bin, and the clean cotton will come out the other end. So Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin to clean cotton faster. Important person at the top. Well, this sounds all fine and dandy, but it has some huge issues that come along with this invention. Raising cotton in the same fields year after year wore out the soil. In search of fertile soil, cotton planters began to look at lands further west. The cotton gin required fewer slaves for cleaning cotton, but the increase in cotton production required more slaves for planting and picking cotton on plantations. The cotton gin caused slavery to spread. So it has a huge impact on the spread of slavery, because what they did is they started moving further and further west and making these cotton fields go into Texas and across the south of the United States. So it actually, instead of decreasing the amount of workers needed, it increased because of the cotton production across the South. More and more cotton fields were grown. So the cotton gin is our second, third, no, I don't know, it's like the fifth invention down on the list. The fifth invention down. Um, it is a machine that quickly and easily separates cotton fibers from their seeds. And the impact on the US was severe. Cotton plantations spread west, which also caused slavery to spread west. Again, that's the invention is found the second from the bottom.
This is the story of an invention that changed the world. Imagine a machine that could cut 10 hours of work down to one. A machine so efficient that it would free up people to do other things, kind of like the personal computer. But the machine I'm going to tell you about did none of this. In fact, it accomplished just the opposite. In the late 1700s, just as America was getting on its feet as a republic under the new U.S. Constitution, slavery was a tragic American fact of life. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson both became president while owning slaves, knowing that this peculiar institution contradicted the ideals and principles for which they fought a revolution. But both men believed that slavery was going to die out as the 19th century dawned. They were, of course, tragically mistaken. The reason was an invention, a machine they probably told you about in elementary school, Mr. Eli Whitney's cotton gin. A Yale graduate, 28-year-old Whitney had come to South Carolina to work as a tutor in 1793. Supposedly, he was told by some local planters about the difficulty of cleaning cotton. Separating the seeds from the cotton lint was tedious and time-consuming. Working by hand, a slave could clean about a pound of cotton a day. But the Industrial Revolution was underway, and the demand was increasing. Large mills in Great Britain and New England were hungry for cotton to mass-produce cloth. As the story was told, Whitney had a eureka moment and invented the gin, short for engine. The truth is that the cotton gin already existed for centuries in small but inefficient forms. In 1794, Whitney simply improved upon the existing gins and then patented his invention, a small machine that employed a set of combs that could separate seeds from lint mechanically as a crank was turned. With it, a single worker could eventually clean from 300 to 1,000 pounds of cotton a day. In 1790, about 3,000 bales of cotton were produced in America each year. A bale was equal to about 500 pounds. By 1801, with the spread of the cotton gin, cotton production grew to 100,000 bales a year. After the disruptions of the War of 1812, production reached 400,000 bales a year. As America was expanding through the land acquired in the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, yearly production exploded to 4 million bales. Cotton was king. It exceeded the value of all other American products combined, about 3/5 of America's economic output. But instead of reducing the need for labor, the cotton gin propelled it, as more slaves were needed to plant and harvest king cotton. The cotton gin and the demand of northern and English factories recharted the course of American slavery. In 1790, America's first official census counted nearly 700,000 slaves. By 1810, 2 years after the slave trade was banned in America, the number had shot up to more than 1 million. During the next 50 years, that number exploded to nearly 4 million slaves in 1860, the eve of the Civil War.
The Industrial Revolution impacted other ways we lived. In the Central Plains, farmers used John Deere's new steel plow. This new plow was stronger but lighter than the old iron plows. It required only a horse instead of a team of oxen. John Deere's invention helped plow the rich prairie soil of the Central Plains, Minnesota, and the Midwest. One issue that arose was how to get crops and resources from the Central Plains to the factories and cities on the northeastern coast. Rivers weren't always located where people needed them. Canals are man-made waterways that connect to other waterways. So you can see in this map, like where Minnesota's over in Lake Superior, way over on the west edge of that map. And you can see how the Great Lakes are a good waterway to use to get out to the Atlantic Ocean, but there are some areas that are over land. So in some of those areas, they could build man-made waterways called canals, okay, to connect them so that they could bring ships through and be able to transport crops and other resources from one area to the next. In 1817, New York engineers and workers built a canal that linked the Hudson River to the Great Lakes. This is called the Erie Canal. It created a continuous water route that linked the farms in the Central Plains to the factories and cities on the East Coast. The Erie Canal was so successful that many other northern states began to build more canals. This was a huge invention or creation, the Erie Canal, because it transported goods for the first time, really, from those central plains to the factories. So an Erie Canal is a man-made waterway for transporting goods where there weren't wide enough rivers. And this linked factories in the east with farms in the Midwest. Steam engines. In the early 1800s, Congress approved funding to construct a national road system across the Appalachians. However, travel by road was still slower than travel by water. In 1807, Robert Fulton improved transportation by water when he added a steam engine to his boat to the Clermont. He raced his steamboat upriver, going against the current. By the 1820s, smoke belching steamboats were chugging up and down major rivers across the Great Lakes. So, important inventor up there, Robert Fulton, he invented the steamboat. Now, he invented the steamboat using a steam engine. So by the 1820s, smoke belching steamboats were chugging up and down major rivers. This sped up transportation and allowed people and goods to be moved faster without having to rely on the current or the wind. Ultimately, steam engines would be used to power other inventions too. In 1830, British inventor George Stephenson used a steam engine to build a locomotive that runs along tracks. The age of the railway had begun. By the start of the U.S. Civil War, the United States had built railroad tracks to link many northeastern cities. The southern states did not invest in building as many miles of railroads because they had built plantations along wide rivers where they could easily load and unload their cash crops to sell off in markets. So steam engines were used in the steamboats, and then they started using them for trains. So steam engines used heated water to power the engines. This improved transportation with boats and trains. And lastly, we talk about the inventions with communication. In the 1830s, Samuel Morse and other inventors worked to create methods of long distance communication by transmitting electrical signals by wire. Morse also developed a code that assigned a set of dots and dashes to each letter of the English alphabet. In 1844, the first telegraph message was sent from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, Maryland. By 1866, telegraph wire had been laid across the Atlantic Ocean between the US and Europe. So Samuel Morse invented the telegraph and the Morse code. And the telegraph sent an electrical signal across a wire to a receiver at the other end. This was instant communication along long distances. So instead of waiting weeks for messages, they would get these messages pretty quickly, and they would just have a translator on the other end of it who would translate the dots and dashes into the message using the English alphabet. All right, and this concludes your notes for notes 11 and also for the entire unit. Have a great day.